transparencia. Para el cierre de este tercer Seminario Internacional de Archivos, Derechos Humanos, Memoria Histórica y Transparencia, queremos presentarles a la doctora Rama Mani, quien nos presentará desde el Teatro de la Transformación una forma diferente de comprender los procesos de justicia transicional y de justicia transformativa a través de los archivos. La doctora Rama Mani, con su exposición Liderazgo y transformación hacia la paz, por supuesto. La doctora Rama Mani, de nacionalidad francesa y ciudadana de ultramar de la India, es licenciada magna cum laude en Ciencias Políticas y Literatura Francesa del Bryan Marr College de Estados Unidos, con maestría en Asuntos Internacionales de la Escuela de Estudios Internacionales Avanzados de la Universidad Johns Hopkins de Estados Unidos, y doctorado en Ciencias Políticas de la Universidad de Cambridge en Reino Unido, coordinadora de la promulgación de la transformación global en el Centro de Estudios Internacionales de la Universidad de Oxford. Es miembro del Consejo para el Futuro del Mundo. Líder transformadora, constructora de paz, poeta y artista de performance, cuya vida, obra y arte están dedicados a la transformación humana y global. Recibió el Premio de Paz Peter Becker en el 2003 en la Universidad de Marburg en Alemania por el impacto combinado de su beca y su defensa de la paz. La doctora Rama es fundadora de la Academia del Teatro de la Transformación, una asociación sin ánimo de lucro registrada en Ginebra, Suiza, y cuyo propósito es defender el poder creativo de la humanidad para dar forma al futuro compartido. Coordinadora de la iniciativa colaborativa Promulgando la Transformación Global en el Centro de Estudios Internacionales de la Universidad de Oxford, que busca redefinir paradigmas de poder y dar respuesta creativa a las crisis globales actuales. Asimismo, es la cofundadora de Rising Woman, Rising World, un grupo global de mujeres líderes con el objetivo de co-crear un mundo que funcione para todos, establecido conjuntamente con la profesora Jean Houston y la doctora Sylvia Elworthy. Fue asesora principal y miembro jurado del Premio Nobel Alternativo o Premio Right Livelihood. Rama fue anteriormente director ejecutivo del Centro Internacional de Estudios Étnicos, el principal centro de investigación y política de Sri Lanka que se ocupa de los conflictos, la paz y los derechos humanos. Fue directora del curso de Paz y Seguridad Global para diplomáticos de alto nivel, oficiales militares y responsables de políticas internacionales en el Centro de Política de Seguridad de Ginebra y todavía es conferencista allí. Es miembro de la Facultad de la Academia de Derechos Humanos y Derecho Internacional Humanitario de Ginebra en el Instituto Universitario de Altos Estudios Internacionales y en la Universidad de Ginebra enseña justicia transformativa para la maestría en justicia transicional y ha sido investigadora senior del Centro de Investigaciones de la Universidad de Oxford desde el año 2009. También es investigadora asociada en la Facultad de Educación de la Universidad de Johannesburgo en Sudáfrica y ha colaborado con las Naciones Unidas desde 1992. Escuchamos a la doctora Rama Mani con esta intervención.
Hello. What a great honor, privilege, and pleasure it is for me to be invited to be part of this. I will not call it a conference, but a gathering, a co-creation, a co-participation, where we come together to honor our past, where we come together to see how each one of us can contribute to building an archive, to preserve the past in order to build our shared future. So I'm so grateful to the CNMH for inviting me, to the Directorate of Archives of the CNMH for organizing so beautifully, so thoughtfully so inclusively, this global gathering, which takes us to every province of Colombia and also to every continent and every part of the world. And I want to start to invite you to first light 2 candles with me. So let us light them in our own hearts, in our homes, in our communities, in our organizations, in our countries. The first one, to honor all those whose lives have been lost in conflicts, in violations, in injustices. Let us remember each one of them, because every single one of them is a part of the whole, the part of the past and the part of the future. And we light a second candle together. And it is a candle for every single one of you who has joined this gathering, every single one in your communities, your countries, your organizations, who has gone through this conflict, who has survived, who has witnessed, who has cared, and is now working together to create the future. So we light this candle for all of you who are building the future, honoring the past, archiving the past, remembering the past, not to get stuck in the past, but in order to build a better future for all humanity in each of our communities and countries, and for the world, for the earth as a whole. So with these 2 candles bearing witness to what we will share today, I keep them here. I want to start by saying, why is this important? Why is this gathering where we come together to share our expertise, our knowledge, our questions, our doubts, our worries, our fears, our sorrow, our joys, our hopes? Why is this important, this archiving of our memories? And why are each and every one of you a part of making this archive possible, of creating and preserving this mosaic of our memories, so that we can become like this very beautiful painting by an Afro-Brazilian great artist from Brazil, from Salvador de Bahia, whose name is Menelao Seche. So we can once more, despite all of the conflicts, the suffering, the losses, become a whole. Each part of society, human beings, the youth, the elders, the animals, the birds, the nature, living together as a whole. The reason it's so important is that every part of our lives carries a piece of the memory of what happened to our societies, what happened to our communities. And though it sometimes can be painful to remember, if we can do so, we can build this archive together for so many reasons. To honor those who have lost their lives, to keep their memories alive in a positive way so that their wisdom can guide us in the future, to ensure that we do not repeat what we have done, to preserve and rebuild our cultures in new ways, because our cultures is made up of our memories, to tell our stories because our archives are each one of our stories, and to collect all this evidence so that the museum of our memory can also be the museum of our future. In order to take us deeper into understanding this, I would love to share some of my journeys around the world to different continents where I've pursued this deep question of how do we restore justice when injustices, violations, domination, exploitation, dictatorship, civil wars, genocide has torn our lives apart. And what I want to share is not my theories or my concepts. I want to share a few of the hundreds and hundreds of stories of people in different continents, because their stories are as precious and simple and touching as each one of your stories, wherever you are. And together we can see how in every different conflict and country, people found different ways to create their memories, to archive their memories, so they could honor and preserve the past, prevent the recurrence, deter a violation from happening again, and build a future together. Because every time that any society, any culture, any community builds its own inclusive, just, regenerative future, we are doing it for ourselves, we are doing it for our children and our children's children, but we are also doing it for our whole planet, for all beings on this planet. So we will go and visit Cambodia in Asia, Rwanda in Africa, Afghanistan also in Asia, Palestine in the Middle East, and then we will come back to Latin America, to South America, to Peru. And then we will open up so that we can go into each of your homes and communities, wherever you are joining this conference, to share your inputs, your thoughts, your stories, your pieces of evidence to build this archive together for our past and for our future. So my way of telling stories is that I actually enact them. I embody the stories. And I should share that I do so not to take away the stories from those who have lived them, but it's simply to transmit the way in which they affected me and enabled me to learn and grow and understand and bear witness and be able to link all these stories together so we can together imagine how to build a just future. Yes, and many of these people, in fact, everyone whose story I share, it's individuals and communities that I've had the honor to meet, to sit together with, to learn from. Sometimes there are communities that I'm very close to and I've worked with for many years. Sometimes I may only have had the good fortune to visit that community once. But what I know is that story, that community left a deep impression on me because it showed me the power of transforming our lives, our suffering, through our stories, through our evidence, through our archives, through our memory, into the possibility of building a collective future. So come with me on this journey, and then we will come back here together and see what have we learned together and how can we share these experiences with each other across Colombia, across South America, across all of our continents and our world to build the future. My name is Valnath from Cambodia. I grew up in Battambang province. From the time I was a small child, I loved to paint. My teachers would get angry because I would make drawings in all my school books, but I could not stop myself. I started painting in a small studio when I was young. I got married and had children, but I kept on painting. Then the Khmer Rouge came to our country. In the beginning, for the first 2 days, I was happy. I thought that they would bring peace to our country. But they did not. They removed us all from our homes. We were all poor. First, they killed the artists and the academics, the school teachers, the professors. In the beginning, I was sent to a labor camp. But one day they arrested me and they brought me to Tol Sleng, S21. I did not understand why, because S21 is the torture camp for the leaders of the party. When the leaders of the party are no longer popular with the great leader Pol Pot, they are sent to this torture camp. But I was a nobody. Why was I brought here? Normally, I told you that all artists and teachers were killed. But in my case, when they saw that I was a painter, they said to me, "Oh, Vannath, you will make a painting of our great leader, Pol Pot." I said yes, and I painted a painting of our great leader, Pol Pot. They liked it. They made me paint many paintings of our great leader, Pol Pot. That is how I stayed alive. By making paintings of our great leader, Pol Pot, and by bearing witness to all that I saw in these prison walls, all the acts of torture that were committed here against innocent people. When the Pol Pot regime ended and the genocide ended, we went back to our homes, but our hands were empty. We had nothing left. I did the only thing I could do. I kept painting. But now, I could not paint like I did before. All my paintings were the scenes that I had witnessed, which I could not talk about then, which I could not paint at that time. All the scenes of torture, all the scenes of destruction of my country. Look, all the walls are filled with my paintings. When they made the torture camp into a memorial museum, they asked me, "Vannath, can we exhibit your paintings here to show people what happened to our country?" I said, "Yes, please." Because there are two reasons why I paint. I paint these scenes so people will always remember. I paint these scenes so we will never forget our past. I paint these scenes so this will never happen again to anyone. Thank you. So now we travel to Africa, to Rwanda, and the genocide in Rwanda. My name is Wendy. I work in this museum, the Murambi Memorial Museum for survivors of the genocide in Rwanda. Come, I will show you around this museum. Look, look, that is the spot. There. That is where he pushed me. He pushed me so hard. And he said, run, run, run to save your life and to save our baby daughter. It was my husband. They had captured him and our 2 sons. We had all come here to shelter in this training center when the Hutus began to kill us all. The mayor had promised us protection here, but it was not true. I did not want to run. I did not want to leave my husband and our 2 sons. Why this killing? For so long we had lived together on all these hills. So many of us were mixed, like our sons and our daughter. Half Hutu like me, half Tutsi like my husband. But my husband kept saying, run, run, save your life, save our daughter. So with my daughter Divine on my back, I ran. He had showed our captures, my nose, my face. Look, he said, she is a Hutu, let her go. So I left them behind and I ran with my daughter Divine. We escaped, but we did not escape our memories, thinking what could have happened to our family, to all of our neighbors, our cousins, everyone who lived together for so long. When the genocide was over, I came back to this place to see if I could find anything, any remains, any evidence of my husband and our 2 sons. There was one big mass grave, but there was nothing. And then they built this museum, this memorial, to collect the evidence, to find the bones in the mass graves, to give some stories to and names to these bones. I came here and I asked if I could work in the museum. They gave me a job. This is what I do now. I go around and I show people what happened. And I keep looking for evidence everywhere. No, I do not know. In which of these 50 rooms, which of these 50,000 skeletons belongs to my sons or my husband? But every day I open the room of every class and I look inside and I say, Célestin, mon amour, are you there? Petit bébé, my son, is that you? Georges, mon grand, where are you? Yes, I do not know where they are. But I know that as long as I stay here and honor their memory and preserve this place with all our stories and evidence, I know they have a chance to rest in peace, my family and all the others who died here in Rwanda. And my daughter Divine, she has grown big. She is always coming first in school. She studies hard because she knows that she is the future and she must carry the memory of her father and her brothers into our future. Thank you for visiting our museum. Please share our story with everyone you meet. Thank you. Merci. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, very, very warm welcome to our country, Afghanistan, to Kabul, our capital city, and to the National Museum of Afghanistan. My name is Mr. Masoodi, and I hope that you will get a chance to meet all the members of our team working here to build this National Museum, because you see, this museum belongs to all Afghans and to all of humanity. Did you see the plaque outside at the entry of the museum? It says, "A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive." This is what we believe. You see, we realized already when the Soviets left our country and the Civil War started that our culture, our history, our stories were in danger. So we came together here, me and my team, and we thought, what must be done? Because this museum was on the front lines of the war. There, on that hill, there was one militia shooting. On this hill was another one throwing missiles and bombs. And we were in the middle, bombs and bullets, destroying the walls, destroying the artifacts that preserve our history and our stories. All the precious national archives preserved here were at risk of burning in the flames. That is why we gathered here, to make a plan. We realized we had to be very clever, even very naughty and mischievous, to save our culture, our stories, and our history. This is what we decided. We chose 3,000 pieces of the most important artifacts and archives from this whole museum. We made an inventory of every single piece. We packed it up very carefully so no one would suspect what is inside. Then we divided it up and we hid it in 3 different places. You know where? In the center of Kabul. Who would think of looking for our national precious artifacts and relics in the center of Kabul? But we did not tell anybody about it, not even the media, no one. Every year, one of us team members would go in secrecy to check on the archives, to check the inventory to see that everything was in place. Meanwhile, the museum here, oh, what a disaster. Only bullet holes. Everything pillaged and ravaged and taken away and looted. Only the pigeons were making their holes and homes in the rafters. When the war ended in 2001, we came back slowly to this place. So many of us had become refugees or were struggling to survive in neighboring countries. When we came back and saw the state of our beautiful National Museum, our hearts were going to break. But we took courage. We said we will rebuild from scratch, room by room, and piece by piece, the history and culture of our country. We went back to those secret places and brought out all our artifacts. We unpacked them and checked the inventories, and most of them were intact. That is how we began over here. But you see, I told you in the beginning, the National Museum of Afghanistan is not in these stone walls, oh no. The National Museum of Afghanistan must live in the heart of every single Afghan, whether it be a man, a woman, or a child, whatever their ethnic background. And so, we created a book, but how will our people read books? So we have created a mobile museum, and it goes from province to province, from village to village, from municipality to municipality, from school to school, wherever the security situation will allow it, so that every Afghan can learn. Who are we? Where do we come from? And where are we going? And so every Afghan can also share his or her own stories to make our culture live again. Because, as we said in the beginning, a nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. And the culture of a country is made by all of us together. Thank you, Tashakur. Please come again. We will be very happy to receive you here anytime with your friends, your colleagues from any part of the world. And with this, our journey continues, and we go now from Afghanistan to the Middle East, to what we call the Holy Land of Palestine. And there, we will hear the importance of storytelling to build an archive and preserve our memories in order to have reconciliation and justice. Salam alaikum. My name is Yusra, but I am called Shihab. I am the mother of 7 sons. We have suffered so much under occupation and the conflict that our land, Palestine, has known since 1948. All of my sons were imprisoned and spent long years in jail. 2 of my sons were killed. All my neighbors said, "You should be proud of your sons. They are martyrs for our cause of freedom." But I was not proud. I was broken with sorrow. But any time I tried to cry, people would tell me, "Dry your tears. You must not grieve for them." How could I? My heart was like a bucket full of tears, but I had nowhere to put them. So I went half crazy. I would run away from home just to find a place to weep and to drown in my memories of sorrow. My husband gave up on me. Maybe he was thinking of putting me in a mental asylum because he thought I had lost my mind. But then he heard of the Women's Studies Center. He heard that women were gathering here, women like me who had lost their hearts, who had lost their sons, their children. He brought me here. Here, the women told me, "You are a mother. You have the right to cry." Just crying was such a relief. Here, we all shared our stories with each other. Some of us are educated. Some of us had to leave school when we were very young because of the war. All our stories would be documented and become part of our archives of the Women's Studies Center, so that we could use each one of these cases when one day we can have justice and accountability for all the crimes that we have seen, all the violations and suffering that we have known. Step by step, I also shared my story. You know, It is not just sharing stories. By sharing stories, every one of us women learned how to become a community leader. Even an old woman like me, I became a community leader. And you know what I do even now in my old age? I go from village to village, and I knock on the door of women whose hearts are broken with grief, like mine once was. I tell them my story. I hold them, and as they cry, and I ask them to share their story, so that together we can record all our stories, so that together every one of us who thought we were victims, filled with grief, can become community leaders, to support others in our community, to take our whole country together on the path of peace and reconciliation for all. Now I thank my sons. They lost their lives, but they helped me to become of some use to my community. My sons who will always be in my heart. Salam. Peace be upon you. Now we come to our last story, which is in Peru. I am Mama Angelica from Peru. I will never forget the day that they stole mi hijo, my son Archimedes. He was only 19. He was studying in the university. That very day I went to the Casa Capito and I began to protest. Give me back my son. Give us back our sons and daughters. Every day I would come and protest over there. Every day there would be more and more women, old and young, coming to beg the army to give us back our sons, our daughters, our husbands, our brothers, our fathers. I looked at all the women, their eyes full of grief like mine, their bodies full of hunger. I realized one day, as I went around speaking to them, alone there is not much we can do, but juntos, together, there is a lot we can do. We must organize ourselves. That is how ANFACEP was born, the Asociación Nacional de los Familias de los Desaparecidos, the association, the National Association of the Families of the Disappeared. Together, we began to share our stories. We began to collect the evidence that we had recorded. We began to remember where, when, at what time, and how were our children taken from us. We began to write down each one of these pieces of evidence. That is how we came up with the idea that we must create a museum of memory, un museo de memoria. one day. The president-elect heard about our movement, and he came to meet with us, and he said, if I win the elections, you will get your Museo di Memoria. We will give you the reparations you are asking for. But we have learned all politicians are the same. They remember us before the elections, but we can only hope that they will remember us when they are elected. So they did create a National Commission of Truth and Reconciliation. But we, Quechua women, the indigenous women and men of this Ayacucho area who have suffered the most in this long and dirty war, we decided, all of this evidence we have collected, we will make our own Museo di Memoria here in Ayacucho. So we made this museum by ourselves. In it, we collected and recorded the evidence, the archives, the photographs, all that we had left, the clothing, the pieces of memories that we had left of our beloved ones, and we put them here. Our Quechua artists made these paintings for us to record the scenes of all that we had witnessed and suffered, and all of the hopes that we had for our future. We even have a small shop where our women make our artifacts so they can sell them and get some small livelihood support to support their families. You see, we realize that what they call evidence in the courtrooms lies in our hands, lies in our minds. You see, we have realized that the evidence to have justice one day lies in our own hands, in our own hearts, in our memories, in our mind, in our homes. If we can remember all of those details and collect them, if we can build a beautiful museum like this to honor all those we have lost, then we have a chance for justice and reconciliation, and the souls of our beloved ones can find their place in the stars with our ancestors. We are the mothers. We are the families of the disappeared. And until we die, we will never give up hope that our children can be honored. Their lives will not be in vain. Muchas gracias. So I turn back to you all who have tuned in to this conference, to this session, and who are here with us from around the world and around Colombia. So I turn back to all of you now after this short journey we have been on to countries around the world that were torn apart by conflict, to see how ordinary people, ordinary communities found their own ways to collect their memories, to archive them, and to use these archives, these memories, these stories to build the future. So let's look quickly at where we have been and what we have seen. We went to Asia, to Cambodia, and there we met Van Nath, and we saw how he spent his whole life after he escaped and survived as a victim, as a prisoner in the most terrible torture camp in Cambodia called S21, how he spent the rest of his life painting the scenes of torture he had seen in this camp. And why did he do that? When I met him shortly before his death, when he was already about 80 years old, he said, I paint to remember. I paint so people will never forget. I paint so this will never happen again. This is why our memories, our archives are important. From there, we went to Rwanda. And there in Rwanda, we met Wendy. She herself is a Hutu, but she lost her Tutsi husband and 2 sons in the genocide in their own village. But she was able to save her daughter, Divine, who we see in this picture with Wendy. And she had the courage to come back and work in the Memorial Museum, where amongst the 50,000 skeletons are the skeletons and bones of her own 2 sons and husband. Why? She says it is to honor those memories. It is to help in collecting the evidence so that justice and reconciliation can spread once again, as in her childhood, as in the past, where communities can live together in villages, across all of their ethnic differences as one human family. From there, we went to Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, we went to the National Museum and we met with Mr. Masoodi and with his team who had preserved the most important archives and artifacts of their National Museum. And their motto was, a nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. And what they tried to do was to restore the museum in the capital city, but at the same time, bring the culture of Afghanistan to every single community, municipality, school, province around the country, very much as the government of Colombia is trying to do, as CNMH is trying to do, to have a museum of memory in the capital, but also to be present around the country so that it can be there for all of the people of Colombia. And this has been the same case in many other countries where the government has taken the responsibility together with its people, together with its civil society, together with its scholars to create an archive and preserve and keep alive a country through its culture, through its stories, through its people. From there, we traveled to the center, to the Middle East, to Palestine. And in Palestine, we met with Shihab and the women of the Women's Studies Center, which are in all the cities and villages of Palestine in the occupied territories. And like this graffiti on the walls of separation show, each one of them has realized that even a war cannot stop our stories. And our stories are important because they contain the evidence that we need to piece together the past, to honor the memories, and to create the future. And so these women use storytelling to collect the record of the past, to make an archive for the future. But at the same time, the power of storytelling is they become community leaders. And women of all ages, all backgrounds, all educational levels, whether they have gone only to school, have never been to school, have gone to university, they work together in order to become community leaders and support each other in the long journey to peace and reconciliation and justice. Finally, we came back to this beautiful continent of South America, and we traveled to Peru, and we traveled to Ayacucho, where the primary population is the Quechua, who suffered the most in the war. And we saw how Mama Angelica, who fought for justice and reparations for her community till she died only a few years ago, we saw how they built their own museum of memory and how they found that even they, as the Quechua indigenous people, could preserve and create an archive, save the evidence from everything that they had left of their loved ones, whatever it was, in whatever form, and how they covered their museum with artwork done by their Quechua artists. The scenes are sometimes painful, but they are also scenes of hope for the future. It was very beautiful because I met Mama Angelica many years ago. I believe it was 2009, and met with the ANFACEP and heard her story and visited the museum. And just 2 years ago, one of my students in my class on transformative justice, who is from Peru, said, "I have good news for you. Mama Angelica got finally the news of what was done to her son Archimedes when she was perhaps about 83 years old. And 1 month after she got that news and knew that her son had been recorded, that he could rest in peace, she passed away. She could rest in peace because she had fulfilled her life's mission and knew that others in her community would fulfill their life's mission, and justice was being done. So with this, dear friends, I come back to you with this message being very clear that the work of CNMH, the work of the Directorate of Archives is so important because it helps us to see how each one of us, each one of you who has suffered in conflict, who has lost so much, can work together to create the evidence, to honor our past, to learn from our past, to honor those we lost, and to use them as our guides as we build a future that is just, inclusive, regenerative for the whole Earth family. Thank you so much.